It's interesting because men don't have to understand this. Like they've never been
Correct.
asked to change their name. Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Stevick Rust. 40 years of sitting with people through their hardest moments has taught me one thing: our power lives in our courage to be real. This is where we stop pretending and we find our way back to ourselves. I'm glad you're here. Now pull up a chair. This is Becoming Real. An estimated 69 million American women in the United States have a birth certificate that doesn't match the name they use today. Think about that for a minute. 69 million women who got married, changed their names, built careers, raised children, signed mortgages, opened bank accounts, earned degrees, and lived most of their adult lives under a name different from the one on their birth certificate. Now, most of us never think twice about that until suddenly we have to, because a name isn't just paperwork. It's tied to our identity, our family beliefs, our history, our traditions, and the choices women have made across generations. And now, with the proposed SAVE Act, those choices are being pulled into very practical questions. Do the documents you have match the name you use today? This has already sparked conversations among women that I know, friends, colleagues, mothers, daughters, about our names, our identity, changing our name, marriage documents, and the choices that maybe we felt we didn't really have a choice in. Now, let me be clear: changing your name, keeping your name, hyphenating it, or creating something completely different is personal. And it's a woman's choice to make that. There's no right answer here. Hear me again. There is no right answer here. And honestly, women are already getting plenty of messages about what they should choose, how they should live, and whether their traditional or non traditional roles are the right ones. That's not this conversation. Today, we're talking about the SAVE Act, but we're also talking about something much bigger. We're talking about why women changed their names in the first place. We're talking about the history behind that, the tradition behind it. We're talking about identity, marriage, family, and belonging. And we're talking about what happens when a practice that most women experienced as personal suddenly intersects with the law. My guest today is an attorney, and she's here to help us sort out what that proposed SAVE Act actually says, what it may mean for women whose documents do not match, and what is still so unclear in this act. However, the real story, I think, begins long before the SAVE Act. In fact, it begins long before most women had the right to vote. Now let's get into this. Let me introduce you to our guest for today. Pat Schraff is a principal at Schraff Thomas Law, an elder and disability law firm in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. She is a certified elder law attorney and an elder law specialist certified by the Ohio State Bar Association Commission on Specializations for the Supreme Court of Ohio. Her practice focuses on estate planning and administration, guardianship, probate litigation, elder law, long-term care, and benefits planning. She's also a licensed independent social worker, bringing both legal and social services experience into her work. She has been selected as a super lawyer each year since 2017 and named among the top women attorneys in Greater Cleveland and Ohio. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest, Pat Schraff. Here, Pat, to talk a little bit about the SAVE Act. There are some people who know a lot about it and other women who are saying, I'm not really sure what this even means. So let's start at the
Mhm.
top of the time here. Explain for us what the SAVE Act actually is and what we need to be
Okay.
thinking about.
Well, the SAVE Act addresses the ability of people to vote and what's necessary to vote. And the issue with the SAVE Act has been, how does one prove that they're a citizen? So one of the ways you prove you're a citizen is with a birth certificate or a passport. Well, if your birth certificate has the name you were born with and you now have been married once or twice and your name is not what is on the birth certificate, then what do you do to prove your citizenship, or how do we deal with citizenship for women? So some people have passports, but a lot of women do not have passports. And that's a significant problem. Proving who you are, proving who you are, and that you are someone born in this country, someone who has been naturalized. What name did you use?
So, for people who would say, okay, so how hard is it? So you call and you get your birth certificate. Do you show up
Mhm.
to vote with the birth certificate and you bring your driver's license? Is that gonna be enough? Like, are we making
Mhm.
too big of a deal about this?
Well,
What would you
first
say about that?
First, let's talk about getting your birth certificate. So, seems simple, and if you were born in the last, 30 years, probably no problem. But if you're 85 years old and you're trying to find a birth certificate, last year it took us 9 months to get a client's birth certificate. We have someone in New York that needed to get a birth certificate. We don't have it yet, and it's been over 6 months. So it may not be a quick process to get your birth certificate and have that be able to prove your citizenship.
And all of that, of course, as you started to say, is it has implication for voting.
Yes.
So, one could wonder, is there something more to this SAVE Act than we just want to make
Mhm.
sure that everybody is legally able to vote?
Mhm. And
What would you
that's the
say went
concern.
into this? What are we missing in this whole thing of like, why now? Why are we doing this?
Well, I think that when we're looking at the SAVE Act, that's one of the reasons why it's stalled is that all of these issues on being able to prove identity and whether or not it's an effort to suppress votes for any particular candidate. So there are concerns in that regard. Making it harder to be able to exercise your right to vote um, with no real purpose is not an advantage to anybody.
It that little part of me bubbles up and goes, why are they so afraid of women voting? Now, you maybe don't have to answer that as a lawyer, but as a
Right,
psychologist, I go, well, this is going to hit. I think the numbers look like 69 million women in the United States
right.
do not have a birth certificate that matches their driver's license, for example, because they've
Mm,
changed their name.
correct.
So it almost feels like, again, what are we so afraid of about women?
Right. And why do we have to go through all of these extra steps to try to impact that very important right that women fought for?
Mhm.
Um, why are we making it harder?
Mhm. You want to venture a thought? And you can own it as your own thought.
uh, Probably best to let everybody think about what that means individually.
Okay.
It's certainly, as we've been working on helping women be able to secure those documents to show their citizenship, it's really been a focus on the difficulties that we're putting in the way of women to vote. And so, are we concerned that women are going to vote in a way that men don't want? Are we, is a particular group of people that might not like the way a particular group of women will vote? And so, best not to make it easy to vote. You can put a lot of conjecture into this, but we don't really know. We just know that the wording of the SAVE Act makes it difficult for women who are married to
Mhm.
be able to secure those documents. And it would be best if people lose their birth certificates all the time, lose those kinds of documents. It's best that every woman have a certified copy of her birth certificate. Extremely important. Your marriage certificate is not going to be proof of your citizenship.
So marriage certificate that shows just that won't work.
That won't work.
So it
That
has
won't
to be a
work.
birth certificate.
Has to be a birth certificate.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or naturalization papers.
Mhm.
Naturalization papers.
And this applies really for women who've changed their name through marriage.
Yes.
Mhm.
These are for women who have changed their name.
Yeah. So where is the SAVE Act right now? I mean, I've seen a number of things. We know that it seems to be stalled.
Yes,
What's
it's
your read
still
on that from a legal perspective?
still pending in Congress. Obviously, there have been a lot of issues that have come up that take precedence. Certainly the war in Iran and other matters have taken precedence. So the question is when they will act.
Mhm. It seems to be one that's getting some pushback.
Yes, There's no question that there's been a lot of reaction to this, and there are a lot of lobbyists that are fighting to ensure that the right thing gets done.
Mhm, mhm. So I guess more to come on that
Right,
legal aspect of the
right,
passing of it, but in
right.
the process, I think I almost see it as kind of this shot across the bow, like a warning signal to women
Hmm.
that this is going to affect us. And so it's not dead, it hasn't passed yet, but now is the time to start thinking about getting those documents in order.
Correct. To know that you can prove your citizenship at any time that you have the right to vote. You
Mhm,
need to be able to prove your citizenship.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So that the whole SAVE Act, it's interesting, has sparked a lot of conversation. I
Mhm.
certainly know in my circle, with my daughters, with my friends, about the whole thing about the history of why are we changing our name? I mean,
Mhm.
men are not
Right.
sitting here trying to figure out how to get their birth certificates because they never had to change their name.
Right.
So let's do a quick little back in time.
Mhm.
Historically, I say starting at 1776, but you and I have talked about it and go, well, let's go back
Oh,
even further.
yes,
So let's talk
yes.
about the history of why did we ever start changing our name in the first place?
Right, right. Well, you can go back if you look at the population and the size of the population, you could have a Mary and a Jane and a Tom and a whatever, and everybody knew who you were talking about. And then as population grew, it could be Mary from London and Mary from Dover and Mary, but you knew who you were talking about. But as the population increased, there became a need to determine, well, who's who. And between there's lots of discussion of when it all started, but we can go back to BC and women were known by one name. We get around the ninth to the 11th to the 13th century, and that's when you start to see an adoption of changing a woman's name to the name of her husband. And sometimes it started out with just Mary from the house of Smith, something like that. But as time goes on, there becomes a requirement that women take the name of their husband. So they go from being their name of their father to the name of their husband.
Mhm.
And as that develops, we have a term called coverture. So a woman's name would be subsumed into her husband's. She would become under him. His name would be the dominant name. And that began to have very significant legal consequences or effects. Very
Like,
significant.
like,
Like property rights, like ability to sign contracts, like an ability to determine her own destiny, really. Um, Not being an individual, being one with your spouse, but the one being really secondary to the husband.
mhm. Yeah, I was reading something that, you know, we we sometimes forget women did have they didn't have voting rights, but women who were single, who were not married, had more rights. It's like
Yes.
once you got married, so a single woman, before the coverture law started to apply because you were
Mhm.
married, women had the freedom to have their own checking account,
Right.
banking account, sign documents, all of that. Once they got married, then, as you say, it was subsumed together and it was
Yes.
one
Yes.
and it was his. So a
Right.
woman could no longer independently sign for loans or
Mhm.
her property became his property,
Rights of
all of that.
inheritance. Rights of inheritance were very significant. So eh, we forget, I think, sometimes, particularly sitting in the United States, we forget those rights that we take for granted, the
Mhm,
ability to get credit on our own, the ability to buy and sell things, ability to contract, vote, own property. decide where property goes, all of those things. It's
Mhm.
a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. So one has to look at that. And again, it this whole thing with the SAVE Act has sparked some very interesting conversations even in my family
Mhm.
because um, a name is more than just a name.
Yes.
Now if I put my psychologist hat on, this is tied to our identity. And so
Yes.
I often tell my story. I mean, I got married, I was young. I was in my early 20s. And I did what you do. I don't think it even occurred to me to say, maybe I don't want to change my name.
Mhm.
It felt like it was this romantic, traditional history. It was like if I had said I didn't want to do that, it almost would be offensive or hurtful to my husband, that somehow that reflected my love and my desire to
Mhm.
be with him and just all of that stuff.
Mhm.
And so I changed my name. And I was still in graduate school, and the first time somebody said Lori Rust, I physically felt ill, which I know is such a dramatic response, but I felt physically uncomfortable, and I thought, "That is that's not me." Like,
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
core of me, it was like, "That isn't me." And it had, again, no reflection on being married or my husband, or I think somehow this gets
Mhm.
twisted into, "But you were committed, you wanna be one, you're
Mhm.
starting a family," all that. It sat so uncomfortable for me that I had lots of conversations with Jay, who, if he were here today, would say it felt a little pinchy, is his word, when I
Mhm.
said, "I don't want the name."
Mm.
I but, of course, was gonna support me in what I needed to do. And the hardest thing I had to do was to get my name back. So
Mhm.
I had to actually put my name in the newspaper, like, to make
Mhm.
sure that nobody objected to me getting Stevic back. And I remember saying to my father, "But this is our name. How do I have to fight to get my name back?" And then I opted on the hyphenated because that was my
Mhm.
compromise in saying, "Okay, but I'm gonna have children,
Mhm.
and somehow I need to be connected to that name," and all of that stuff. If I were
Mhm.
doing it today, I never would have changed it because I felt so strongly that my identity was altered in a way that didn't feel
Mhm.
comfortable to me. Now, I
Mhm.
said at the onset of this to our listeners, this conversation is not a judgment. This isn't about you should or you
Right.
shouldn't, but for
Right.
me, it never felt settled. Um, and so I went on and did the hyphenation. And again, I think today I would have just kept the name itself. Now,
Mhm.
you, I know, did keep your name. So talk
Right.
about your story about what's in
Right.
a name
Right.
for you.
Well, for me, I was 15 years old when Gloria Steinem started to publish Ms. Magazine, and my friends all were reading Ms. Magazine. We had the first issue and thereafter for many years. And so from that point in time, um, I knew I wasn't going to change my name. There wasn't going to be a point to change my name. And when it came time, I married young. I married in my early 20s. And my husband was fine with it because he, of course, knew me from college and high school. And so uh, if you knew me, you knew I wasn't going to change my name.
He said, "My
Uh,
my soon-to-be wife is a Ms. Magazine reader."
Yes, exactly, exactly. And, but I can tell you that certainly my father-in-law thought it was the most outrageous thing he'd ever heard and was very disturbed by the fact that I was going to do this. And I would say that it was interesting people who would just go ahead and send Christmas cards or birthday cards or whatever. Just add, just go ahead and put my husband's name on it. But it was always foreign to me, and it was
Mhm,
always like, oh, this person doesn't know me very well.
mhm,
Um, but and then I didn't change anything. Now, Social Security decided about 15 years into my marriage to send me a new Social Security card with my husband's name, but I had never asked for it. No one had ever asked for it. And fortunately, it was easy to resolve. I said, I didn't send you anything asking you to change my name, and there is no other name. This is not my name. And it's true, it's a very individual thing. It's what matters to you as a person. how
Mhm.
you see yourself. A person's name is important. I, People don't want their names misspelled. People don't want the
Mhm.
wrong variation of their name used.
Mhm.
They want their name because that's how they feel about themselves.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you mentioned the part about your father-in-law because I think,
Mhm,
when we talk about identity and what's in our name and what it reflects at our core,
mhm, mhm.
um, it's also a way to disrespect somebody. And
Yes.
we certainly can see that. Like if I mispronounce your name intentionally, or I decide it should
Yes.
be this way, or,
Yes.
you don't want to be called Patricia, but I call you Patricia.
Mhm,
It's a way to take disrespect, I think, as a
mhm,
sign of
mhm.
disrespect when people won't honor that.
Right.
And it's since you're sharing your father-in-law story, I will say that um, God rest her soul, but my mother-in-law never adjusted to the name me keeping, or even again, I didn't even keep my name. I
Mhm.
hyphenated my name. I compromised, but she would send me birthday cards and Christmas cards addressed to Mrs. J. Rust. And talk
Ah.
about identity hijacking, if you will. I thought,
Mhm.
I don't exist anywhere in that. Like,
Mm,
I'm not
yes.
Rust. My name isn't
Yes.
J, and Mrs. is a title. So
Right.
I didn't have any identity in that. Now, I know that was my reaction to this. For other people, it's like,
Mhm.
they doodled that their whole time in their 4th grade notebook of Mrs. So and so, and
Right.
that's their
Right.
traditional anchor that feels
Mhm.
right for them. But I always felt like it was a sign of disrespect that she would intentionally, knowing that
Mhm.
no part of that was my name. And it's interesting because men don't have to understand this. Like they've never been
Correct.
asked to change their name. Now, I know that there's some men who have and some men who have hyphenated, but I remember saying to Jay probably, I don't know, 15 years ago when we started having more of this conversation, occasionally pieces of mail will come to um, J. Stevick Rust or Mr. Lori Stevick Rust.
Mhm.
And I'll say, like, it takes him aback. And because he's a very honest soul, he'll say, that feels so weird, so
Yes.
uncomfortable. And I'm like,
Yes.
and then could you imagine going your whole life where people only call you by those names? Like the
Right.
core of who you
Right.
are is sort of changed. At least that's the struggle that was on my end. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So this whole thing with the SAVE Act, I think, brings up those questions about how do we I think for women, this is even bigger than just the SAVE Act itself, but is for young women who are listening to this, or for
Mhm.
women who are in early phases of a relationship. I think
Mhm.
these are important things as a psychologist, and you're a social worker as well, that
Right.
we should be having these conversations too. That traditions are beautiful
Mhm.
and generational passing down of traditions can be beautiful, but it
Mhm.
can also be something that locks women into a no choice feeling.
Right. Right. And I think, as I say, it's easy today to realize we have the luxury of saying, I'll keep my name, I'll change my name, I'll do whatever. And there aren't implications. But with the SAVE Act,
Mhm.
I think it brings us back to thinking about the suffragettes, thinking about women's rights, the development of women's rights, and those women who stood up and said, like Lucy Stone, for example, probably
Yeah.
the most famous, suffragist
Mhm.
on this issue. And she kept her name, and she made it very clear she was keeping her name, and she fought for that. And we think that it's not a big deal, but it was a big deal. It was about the right to vote. It was about the ability to own property. It was about not not having your husband control your property and you had no rights in it. Perfect example in Ohio, we have dower rights. Well, dower rights are the interest of a spouse in the property of the other spouse. Well, where did that come from? It came from the fact that a man could sell the house right out from underneath his wife and leave. And there she was with nothing. Dower rights were a property right that ensured that a spouse, that wouldn't happen to a spouse, that they would have an interest. But we forget about all of that because we have these rights. We can contract, but it's not that long ago
Yeah.
that, your ability to work after you were pregnant, you know, those are rights that came about in the 70s. We need to really remember, young women need to look at those things that occurred in the past that really do relate to today. As if it wasn't for those who came before us, we couldn't stand where we stand today.
Yeah, I love that you pulled that together because that's probably why we're having this conversation because it led me to a lot of concerns, um, and conversations, again, with my daughters,
Mhm,
about and this is not about their spouses, this is about them. This is about
mhm,
this act now changes, and I worry is the beginning of the poking and the chipping away, because 'cause we've
mhm.
seen that happening,
Right,
chipping away of more and more and more of women's rights. To
right.
your point that we've taken for granted perhaps because we've had it, and forgetting
Mhm.
about how many women had to really fight, some of them to the death for the rights
Right,
that we have today, and I
right,
worry that when we act like another thing for women to get all nervous about, "Just go get your
right,
birth certificate, it's fine," that there is a much bigger issue underneath this.
right, right. And if it's your right to vote and you can't get your birth certificate in time to prove your citizenship and you miss that opportunity to
Mhm,
vote,
mhm.
that's important.
Yeah,
That's important.
absolutely. Now I know that, you brought up Lucy Stone, and,
Mhm. Yeah.
um I have had the privilege of getting to know the author, of the book Leaving Coy's
Okay.
Hill,
Mhm.
Catherine Sherbrick, and she wrote a fictional version of the history of Lucy Stone, which is a fascinating read, and I'm gonna stick that
Mhm.
also in the link here if anybody's interested. It's a great story, but Lucy Stone, when you read that part of the story, there was a law, and then there were the customs.
Mhm.
So even like if we look at Jim Crow era, there was a law, and
Mhm.
then even when the law changed, there were still customs that we're going to put up barriers. You might have the right to vote, but I'm
Right,
going to make you do literacy tests, or I'm going to make you
right,
go 1,500 miles away from where you should be voting. Every obstacle
right.
started with a law, and even when the law was changed, it became the custom that we're gonna continue to rely on.
Mhm. Correct, correct. No, there's no question about that. But it's also interesting to see what was the norm and what was the law, and then did other people do things differently? Like those who moved out west. Did they follow the same name recognition, name change, name traditions, or not? There were a lot of things going on, is particularly in the United States around those issues.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, it comes back to that whole thing of women have now this is me speaking, this is my
Mhm,
bias. Women have always had to play by a different set of rules,
mhm,
and the expectation of, "This isn't that big of a deal,"
mhm,
or, "Well, how complicated will this get then? If you don't change your name or you hyphenate and then the children and who's their name?" And I recognize that there are complications built in, but
mhm.
for me, this struck such a chord, like, once again, women tried to follow the rules, which were different rules, because we
Right,
never asked a man to
right,
change his name. It never was the
right,
law. It
right,
never was the custom. And
right.
now here we are again. We're the ones who have to pay the price, whether it's a
Mhm.
small price or a big price, and our documents don't come and we lose the right to vote.
Right,
In that cycle, we pay the price for that. And
right.
there's no real answer here
Yeah,
except for me to raise the issue of, I think it's a conversation that I hope all women of all ages who are listening to this start to really sort through for themselves. What do I want? What do I believe versus what is a
right.
custom and a tradition that I feel like I'm just supposed to follow?
Well, and understanding that the development of that tradition led to the loss of rights and that, we had to work back to having property rights for married women, fighting for those laws, changing those laws. What we lost was huge for a tradition.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
became much more, much more.
And that was what? The Married Women's
Property acts that developed in many states over time.
his rights back.
We had to fight to get those rights back, and that was the suffragists. They were the ones fighting for that. So you have married persons property acts coming up in the mid 1850s and thereafter to try to rectify some of that loss of ownership. That's it's your name is one thing. When it leads to loss of property and loss of rights, it leads to loss of value. You're not valued as much as a man
Mhm.
under those circumstances.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a lot to think about from this one little act that looks like
Hmm.
it's being sold as this isn't that big of a deal. Just get your
Right.
documents in order and you can vote. But we know that under every little thing these days and that gets
Yes.
passed, there's there's a motivation, a reason, and a value in it.
Right.
And I think
Right.
understanding that is really important.
Right. Right. Pretending it isn't happening is not going to help.
Mhm. Mhm. So you led at the top of the hour with the idea that it's important to get your documents in order, whether this
Hmm.
passes or it doesn't. This may come back around again. Women need to just do the extra work, get their documents in preparation.
Right.
Um, are there other things that you think that women should be thinking about that this has evoked through
Hmm.
our identity, the legal law, the traditions, the
Hmm.
customs, all that goes into this?
Well, I think when you're making that decision, will I keep my name? Will I hyphenate my name? Will my husband take my name? How is that all going to play? You need to think about the practicality of it. So when I married and kept my name, I didn't have to do a single solitary thing. But when you marry and you decide you're going to change your name, there are lots of steps and lots of places you need to go to prove that your name has changed, to get new identity, your new driver's license, your new social security card, your credit card, so many things.
Mhm.
And make that decision knowing that you're going to have to do those things and that it's fine with you to do that. If that's what you want, that's fine. It's just understanding that the whole search for name for women began with, "I have my own name. Oh, now I don't have my name. Well, now I should be able to get my name back," or and all of that was tied very carefully to laws around property and money and and worth and freedom is a huge piece of this that women need to really think about when they decide what they're going to do about their name. It should be a decision and not just a given. Whatever decision works for a woman, that's fine, but we need to be sure that the laws aren't going to prohibit our freedoms.
Yeah, yeah. I'll echo that and say, and I'll add to that that I hope that um, through these conversations that it evokes or sparks something in a young woman or
Mhm.
a woman getting remarried at any stage in this journey to start thinking about these choices that you mentioned because they have ramifications legally.
Mhm.
But from an emotional standpoint, I think these are important conversations to be having with your spouse or your soon to be spouse
Yes.
around
Yes.
this is not about you. I think I watch a lot of young women struggle with, but we're going to be one. I want us to have a family. I want us to have the
Mhm.
same name. I don't want him to be hurt by this. All the things that I mentioned earlier. I hope that women are feeling a little more empowered to be able to say, you know what? It doesn't have to be a one or the other. Like, this is
Right.
about me. This has nothing to do with love or romance
Mhm.
or connection. It's about me because I'm going to be the one either losing a name or carrying a new identity. And that's
Right.
big. That is just big.
And and the focus should be on partnership and not on on being subsumed by someone else. It's
Yeah,
a
you said
partnership.
subsumed, and I felt myself starting to sweat. It's again, I worry so much about our young women
Right,
and
right.
messaging of, being no word scares me more as a psychologist than the word submissive. And
Mhm,
so or being subsumed,
mhm.
I just we're all about empowering our women that we can carry forward what women have sacrificed and died for to allow us to be here. We
Right,
can't lose sight of that.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
And the stories need to be told. What the suffragists did needs to be recognized because we forget what that struggle was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a good starting place for us. I guess more to
Good.
come on where the SAVE Act will land at the end of all
Okay.
of this. But
Yes.
anything else that you would add to this conversation?
No, I think it's was a wonderful opportunity to be able to reflect on decisions I made long past and on the importance of knowing how the laws work with respect to who you believe you are.
Yeah, sounds great. All right. Well, we'll be staying in touch with you as we see
Okay,
what happens with the SAVE Act.
great.
All right.
All
Thanks
right.
so much for being here.
My pleasure, Laura. Thanks for asking me.
Sure. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Before you go, if this episode touched something real in you, please consider sharing it with someone who may need that too. If you'd like to stay connected beyond the podcast, sign up for my email list at drloristevick.com. That's where I share more reflections, resources, and an invitation to join the real conversation, which is my free live monthly gathering for women who want deeper conversations beyond the podcast. Until next time, be brave enough to be real.